Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is an author, speaker, trainer, and is an emotion rewiring coach. Her passion is helping people identify and eliminate their monster under the proverbial bed. Welcome back to the show, Kim Fiske.
Hey.
Hey.
Good to see you. Good to be here.
Yeah, you too. It's great to have you back. I remember our first podcast, maybe it's almost like a year ago now or more. So crazy. Your book came out and I just remember when we were chatting how important the information was because you distilled it in a very simple way that I thought was important. And I've been meaning to do the second podcast for a while because I wanted to go through each of those elements and explore them because the way that you've put the information together, I think just the awareness alone is huge and super beneficial. So I know you've been on the show before, but why don't you give a little bit about your background, your book, and then we're going to dive into each of these elements one at a time so we can try to uncover these monsters, so to speak, and how we can transform them.
Okay. So yeah, the book came out early October a year ago. So I don't remember exactly when I was on the show with you, but it was shortly after. And I've had just amazing, I did a book tour this last year. Lots of people have given me feedback about how it's impacted them. So that's what really, fires me up is how it really helps people shift to knowing who they really are and what their real purpose is on the planet. So no, my background is I'm married. I have 4 kids, 5 grandkids, live partly in Las Vegas, partly in Southern Oregon, travel a ton. And my background professionally is, I was a homeschool mom. I did drama and theater. I grew up singing and performing in church. But in my professional life, I've just been, I've had a large experience in network marketing, leadership development, mentoring, training, coaching. And so I do NLP. So I've got a lot of little tools in my tool belt. And this is where I've actually gotten the metaphor of the monster under the bed came through all these in the trench conversations and experiences with real people and hearing and seeing why everyone had this little voice. Like it didn't matter, Matt, how put together, perfect, successful, rich, skinny, beautiful. It didn't matter. Everybody I ever worked with or just talked to had that little voice that said, you're not okay. You're not okay. You're not okay. And that just started wearing on me. Like, where did that really come from? What is that? So that's what ended up now to be the monster under the bed, uncovering the lie that drives us.
Yeah, that's so important. And the more I do this work, it just seems like a fundamental thing. It's so interesting. In Zen, they'll talk about the internal dialogue and what's happening in our minds. And most people don't pay attention to that. And most people don't realize that most of the time, unfortunately, most people, that little voice is kind of an a-hole and it's not supporting you. It's not in there being like, you can do it. You're enough. You've got this. Don't worry about failures. This is all these settings and all this programming that is like holding you back and like, oh, I'm not good enough. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. I don't have a degree. I don't have this and that. And we're not aware of them. And it's limiting the quality of our life and the quality of our consciousness and the quality of our life experience. And so when we get what you've done with these 10 monsters, and now you've uncovered some more, is look at very common ones. And I've noticed that too, no matter how successful in business, sport, entrepreneurship, beautiful people, that voice usually isn't super supportive. And so it's such a fundamental thing to understand the dialogue with yourself about yourself. And that's really what I think your book is about. So I'd love you to talk about exactly what the monster under the bed is, give a little bit of background on that. And then we're going to go through ideally the 10 that you've identified, and maybe we'll do some bonus ones after that.
Okay. So it's a different way of even thinking about, because a lot of times we'll go negative self-talk, right? Or limiting beliefs and that inner dialogue. Well, this premise comes from the position that when we were like, how we were neurologically created, basically our whole identity from now as adults, from all of our life, was steeped and created, and the impetus of it was we were only born, when we were born, with survival instincts, the survival emotional limbic part of our brain. We came pre-programmed with some survival programming. Fear is a huge survival instinct. Pollyannas that meditated out on the hillside didn't make it, in the evolutionary process. They needed to be fearful, like, what's going to happen, right? So sometimes, Matt, I judge myself, I judge others that are very fear-based, but honestly, we didn't have a choice in that matter initially, right? Initially, we came pre-programmed. We also are primates, and so we're a communal species. We're not like I have deer out my window here in Oregon, and they give birth, and they nurse for a little bit, but they're pretty self-sufficient. That's not us. We have to have people take care of us. We have to have people in an emotional language. We have to be acceptable to people in order to survive, right? This is all done without any language, without reasoning, without logic. That part of our brain doesn't develop fully until our mid-20s. But guess what? You already are by your mid-20s. Well, sometimes really screwed up because, but this explains why. It's not judgment. It's like, oh, you know why I hear that voice? And actually, I'm going to kind of give another perspective to how you say it's not our friend. It actually doesn't know it's not our friend because it is our friend in its perspective. It has no connection to logic. Even now, your emotional part of your brain only hears and speaks, understands emotion. So when we were little and we didn't have any way of processing anything that happened to us, even if it wasn't a negative thing that happened, let's say our mom slapped our hand from touching the hot stove, right? It would take logic, or she yelled at us about something. I mean, and first of all, we're raised by our parents' monsters to begin with, right? So there's very little hope that any young developing entity is going to develop accurately because you needed brain equipment you didn't have yet. So we processed everything emotionally with the running question: am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? Am I going to be accepted? Am I be, and then fear strikes, even if it's illogical, it's still there. And the limbic brain, the amygdala, whatever, I call her Amy in the book, she only speaks back in emotional responses, which the two primary ones I address are fight and flight, because that's how we survived. And we still do, but we just now, it doesn't make sense to us, does it? All the times where we go, wait, why don't I do what I say? The logical brain is now kicked in. In fact, that's who we're talking to today, is that part of our brain. And now from awareness, you can go, oh, that's what I want. I hope from the work I do with the book and with what I'm doing, starting out with people going, that's why that voice triggers whenever I get fearful or I set a goal. Setting a goal is messing up the status quo. Trying to grow as a person, you're messing with your survival emotional wiring, because even if you're miserable, there's a part of that part of your brain that doesn't want things to change because it doesn't know you will survive the change. See how illogical that is? And that's still today. So we were created, here's the bottom line premise from it, is our identity was steeped and layered and cemented with this, number one, the lie that says I'm not okay. Then you had configurations of why you aren't okay and how that's a flight feeling. Like a flight feeling, I believe, is shame. It's the first one we're going to talk about in a second. And on its heels is a fight message called, showed up in different ways in each of our lives. But the fight message is proving I'm going to make sure I'm okay because I have to survive. So what do? I look around at my environment, people that are in my world that's who's deciding pretty much everything when we're little, is these people that are around us. And for me, it was music. I was like, I grew up in church singing, blah, blah, blah. I looked around. I'm like, okay, they value this. I better do it. I better be good at it. And they're helping me do that as well because it's what they value. So it's kind of how we ended up having to prove that we were acceptable. We had to do something. And the biggest thing I say in the book is you can never get enough of what you never needed to begin with, because we never needed it, but we didn't know it emotionally. And emotionally is who's driving the show even today. In fact, most of the time when I see it in myself, I see it in people I coach and people I know, your emotional brain is still in the driver's seat without investigation. The emotional survival, illogical brain is still driving. Your little 3-year-old is still driving. But we use now the logical brain to rationalize, justify, and defend the decisions our little 3-year-old self makes. So it feels better because we feel like it makes sense somehow now that I want the red Corvette. And, when it really was about me making sure I look good and making sure everybody recognizes how amazing I am and they want to be me but I don't want to be me. So I don't, you know what I mean? Like this, but we rationalize it. Well, the resale value on that's really going to be good. And we're going to, it gets pretty good gas mileage compared, you know what I mean? Like this is how we use the logical brain today, without investigation.
Yeah, all of that is so well put and very succinct and super important, because we operate most of the day in our logical mind, but we don't understand we're driven by all these subconscious, unconscious motives. And then, we use the logical mind and we say, this is why we're doing it. This is why we have to show up at a job we hate forever. This is why I'm unhealthy. This is why this and this and this. And we seek excuses. And we're also, it's so important to understand that this wiring comes like right from childhood. There's a famous, I think it's Socrates or Aristotle. One of them is like, give me the boy until they're the age of 5 and I'll show you the man. And that's, and in working with a lot of people too and coaching, what I've realized doesn't matter where they are in their life, that set of childhood really shapes who they are still, because we didn't get the education to really understand all of this subconscious stuff, why we operate the way we do. So that way we can bring awareness to it and then change the things we need to. So that is just so well put. I don't need to add anything else to it. And
there's one more component that I think will be helpful, especially as we continue the conversation. And that is an actual neurological, in the last, I don't know exactly, but it's a recent discovery of neuroplasticity. They used to think that once your brain was at a certain point, it was solidified. There was no changing it, right? So that's been a recent discovery in medicine, that your brain can change. Well, how the brain actually, how this thought and emotion loop got wired in us is through a process called firing and wiring, Hebb's law. And what fires together wires together. And so in the research of my book, I discovered some cool stuff about it. Wiring especially, which follows firing. Wiring happens through repetition. I had a stroke occupational therapist woman say, we retrain brains now to pick up, so they just repeat, right? Pick up a pen, pick up a fork, do something over and over. That's wiring. But no one really could ever tell me, in the research I did, and even doctors I talked to, I said, what causes the firing? Well, firing, one of the things I believe, and there could be more things that cause firing, so I don't want to be the exhaustive answer here. But it fits my metaphor, it fits my work, it fits everything I've experienced and discovered, is that to the degree you have an emotional response to something, you will fire neurons. Neurons will actually fire. Like this isn't a character flaw, you guys. This is not something, a moral deficit people have. This is actual firing and wiring of your neural pathways of thought and emotion. This is like programming of a physical computer. This is how it happened. That's what you're a victim of without understanding these processes. So to the degree you have an emotional experience. Now, when you're little, that's pretty much all you can have, because you don't even have the brain equipment. You can't. Have you ever tried reasoning with a 3-year-old? 5-year-old? It doesn't really work. They don't get it. As much as you would, come on, listen to me. Can't you understand not to touch that, not to run out into the street? It would take a brain they don't have yet. We didn't have yet. So it fired. Let's say I'm first grade. I stand up in front of my class to give a little report about what I did over summer vacation, and I pee my pants, right? Is that an emotional experience for that little first grader? Absolutely. It's humiliating. The class laughs. So if that had happened just once, there's a firing definitely that happened then. But our brain also, your imaginative brain does not know the difference between a vividly imagined event or something that really, really did occur in your physical world, because your subconscious is not connected to a timeline or linear. It's like it's happened again. It happened again. Every time I thought of that, with the accompanying humiliation emotion, and that picture of me doing it, like the sensual images and feelings were connected, I did it again to my deep self. I did it again. I wired. And then there's something I talk about in the book, and I'm not going too much into it now because we don't have time. It's called mental bloodhounds. The minute I tell that part of my brain, the reticular activating system is really what it is. The minute I give it anything that I believe is true, how do I give it that? Through an emotional feeling, like, I'm not okay, right? And I'm not okay because, and that's what everybody's like, a fingerprint. Everybody has their own, sorry, I got worked up on that inhale. You know, what everybody, how they interpret why they're not okay is like a fingerprint. Everybody has their own kind of configuration about it. But the minute I give that significance or truth to that part of my reticular activating, the mental bloodhounds, it's almost like I just gave it a scent that it can only now pay attention to that evidence that supports that. And anything that happens in my life that might, oh, she's not okay. She's not okay. See, it doesn't sit there and argue with you and say, well, honey, you are unconditionally loved. You are intrinsically valuable and worthy. It doesn't argue. It says, your wish is my command. Tell me what your belief is through how you feel. And that's how we got when we were little. We now all of our life, we've been just gathering the data brought to us. The mental bloodhounds have been showing us that we're right about not being okay. You're right, Kim. You get to be right about it. And to some degree, Matt, and I know you know this, and in my life, I've seen it. Sometimes it's more important for me to be right about how bad I am, about how unworthy I am, about how imperfect I am, about how stupid I am, not good enough I am. And when you start unwiring and deconstructing this, you kind of go, whoa, wow, that's why these patterns keep showing up in my life. That's why I keep getting in relationships with these same kind of people, because I get to be right about how stupid, dumb, imperfect. I attract them so that I can prove that I'm bad, you know, on some level. Anyway, so that's kind of the emotional, mental configuration of how it was actually, it's a wiring that, yeah.
Yeah, that is all so excellent. And the way that I understand a lot of that, when I was studying hypnosis in brain development, what I realized is what I learned was that the brain, when it's, I think it's 0 to 5 or 0 to 7 in there, you don't have what's called the critical factor. So you can't say, hey, Matt, you're awesome. Hey, Matt, you're dumb. Hey, Matt, this, that. You're unable to distinguish all that. So in hypnosis, you bypass the conscious mind. That's why a hypnotist or a magician will distract your mind and take your focus here. Because if you're focused over here, you can't see this next thing. You can't see the suggestion. Or just like if we're doing a guided visualization or relaxation, I say, you know what? You have a healthy body and you love working out. And you're like, bro, I'm 300 pounds. I eat fried chicken all the time. I hate working out, right? That's what the critical factor does. It protects that identity that you've shaped. But from 0 to 7, you don't have that. So it just goes in. You just accept it. And then it becomes wiring. And the more emotion, the stronger it's going to be. And that's why you remember things, you know, like I was just at a Tony Robbins event and he said, you know, use this kind of same example. He's like, do you remember where you were at 9/11? Well, you probably do, because it's such a world event that was emotional. And you'll remember birthdays, you'll remember special events, but you won't remember, you know, maybe 6 months ago on Tuesday. You know what I mean? Where were you April April 7th, unless there was some sort of emotional event. You're like, what the hell was I doing on April 7th? You know? And so it's so important in how the mind works and emotion and everything that I've studied about how to create or manifest, all the law of attraction, all the metaphysical, esoteric. It comes down to understanding what that goal is, but you have to match the emotion. And in sport, you have to match the feeling. Because I've done so many backflips on my snowboard, I don't even need to warm up. I haven't snowboarded in months. You give me a jump, as long as I kind of understand it, I'll go do a backflip first try. Now, doing that, the first time, not going to happen because I'm terrified. I don't know what it feels like. I don't know what it's like to be upside down. I don't know if I'm going to land back on my feet. Oh, my goodness. We got like a power outage. Can you see me? Oh, no. What the heck? Hello? Hello? What the heck is going on?